Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. At around 5:30 a.m. on May 20th, 2000, employees at the Main Street McDonald's location in Belmont, North Carolina, were following their usual Saturday morning routine. It was just before sunrise, and they were preparing to open the fast food restaurant for the normal weekend breakfast rush. However, unbeknownst to the employees, at the same time as they were busy working to get ready for their first customers of the day, another person was in the midst of a different kind of routine. One that involved stealing as much money from the restaurant's cash register and safe as possible. After cutting a small hole in the roof of the McDonald's, the masked robber dropped down through the ceiling, taking all of the employees by surprise. Though he was armed with a rifle, he didn't try to threaten anyone. Instead, he was calm and cordial, asking the employees to please get down on the ground, while he escorted one of them to the restaurant's safe to open it for him so that he could take the money inside. Once he had the cash, the masked robber walked all of the employees into the cooler where they were locked inside, but not before they were asked if they wanted to grab their coats to stay warm while they waited for help to arrive. After that, the masked man fled. While the employees didn't know it at the time, they would soon learn that they had come face to face with one of the country's most notorious fast food robbers, a man whose criminal exploits would eventually become so strange and unbelievable they would seem ridiculous even by the standards of a Hollywood movie. This is the story of Jeffrey Allen Manchester, the so-called Roofman, or rooftop robber. Before we get to the main part of today's story, we'd like to ask that if you enjoy our videos, to please remember to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this. It really helps us to continue building the channel, and if you've watched a few of our videos already, you might not even realize that you're not subscribed. While you're there, don't forget to hit the notification bell as well, in order to stay up to date with our latest releases. Okay, with that out of the way, back to the video. While little is known about why Jeffrey Allen Manchester chose to turn to a life of crime, what we do know is that before he became the notorious robber known as Roofman, he lived what appeared to be a normal life. After graduating from Cordova High School in Rancho Cordova, California in 1991, Manchester became a sergeant in the Army Reserves and reportedly trained in a number of different areas. He received airborne training at Fort Bragg in North Carolina and air assault training at Fort Campbell in Kentucky, and was further trained as an artillery specialist. Some reports we came across also stated that he took several courses involving the operation of military vehicles, including a 6-week course to become a watercraft operator at Fort Eustis in Virginia. Though during this time, Manchester married and had 2 children, the marriage didn't last, and by the end of 1998, he and his wife were in the process of getting divorced, and he no longer lived with her or the kids. Now alone, it was at this point that he apparently decided to put his military training to a different kind of use. In November of 1998, Manchester began a 1.5-year-long crime spree that would allegedly see him rob more than 40 businesses in 9 different states across the continental US. Though he would hit the occasional video rental store, grocery store, or other retail business, his specialty became robbing McDonald's locations. Police would later estimate that these crimes comprised roughly 2/3 of all the robberies Manchester committed between 1998 and 2000. A representative from the fast food company would even once jokingly refer to Manchester as being, quote, brand loyal. While the bulk of Manchester's robberies were committed in California, he would eventually hit McDonald's locations in Nevada, Oregon, Minnesota, Massachusetts, Maryland, Virginia, and both of the Carolinas, making off with an estimated $100,000. Nearly all of the robberies went like this. Manchester would use tools to cut a hole in the roof of the location, dropping down anywhere from 10 to 15 feet before rounding up the employees, stealing the restaurant's cash, and leaving them locked in the walk-in fridge unharmed. Strangely, almost everyone noted that he was exceptionally polite and apologetic towards employees during the robberies, in some cases even joking around with them. In one instance, he reportedly remarked to a group of employees before locking them up, "Hey, at least you get the rest of the day off." Though there were occasionally slight variations to Manchester's robberies, such as him cutting a hole in one of the restaurant's walls instead of the roof, most of the crimes were nearly identical. And aside from one incident where he pistol-whipped an employee, it appears that he almost never used violence while committing the robberies. Because of this, it was fairly easy for authorities to attribute the unusual crimes to the same person. However, identifying and catching that person turned out to be far more difficult. As such, for nearly 2 years, Jeffrey Manchester was known only as Roofman, or the rooftop robber, gaining notoriety across the country and frustrating more than 24 police forces as he continued to commit robbery after robbery without being caught. The key to the Roofman's crimes was the routine. While most criminals would likely think twice about committing the same sort of crime over and over, Manchester knew that each McDonald's restaurant he hit would operate the same way and have the same basic floor plan. Things were always roughly in the same place, and the restaurants ran on almost identical schedules, allowing Manchester to hit them at their most vulnerable times, either while they were closing up for the night or while they were opening up first thing in the morning. That being said, not all of the Roofman's crimes were perfect. During his very first attempt at robbing a McDonald's in Folsom, California, he cut a hole in the roof and dropped inside, only to discover that the restaurant was closed for the Thanksgiving holiday. Sometimes police would find tool marks on the exterior of locations where the Roofman had obviously started a robbery but had needed to abandon his attempt for one reason or another. There were also a fair number of close calls with police. In one instance, Manchester needed to fire his gun at a door to make a last-second escape. In another, he reportedly jumped off a roof and over a fence before managing to get away on foot. The Roofman would finally be identified and caught on May 20th, 2000, shortly after committing the early morning robbery at the Main Street McDonald's in Belmont, North Carolina that we described at the beginning of the video. It turned out that Manchester had made 2 crucial mistakes. The first mistake was the result of hubris. The Main Street McDonald's was actually the second one that he had robbed that day. Just a few hours earlier, Manchester had robbed another McDonald's just 10 miles away in Gastonia as they were closing for the night. Because authorities were more than familiar with the Roofman's MO by this point, there was still a heavy police presence in the area at the time of the second robbery. Manchester's second mistake was not properly securing the cooler at the Belmont robbery. As a result, the employees managed to get out much quicker than he had anticipated and alerted police to the second crime. After being spotted heading towards a getaway car in a nearby church parking lot, police chased Manchester into the woods. When they caught up to him a short time later, he was still carrying his rifle, as well as a nylon bag containing drills, pry tools, hammers, and all of the cash he had stolen from the 2 McDonald's locations. True to his reputation, Manchester didn't put up a fight when cornered by officers, instead telling them, quote, "You guys did a really good job today." With Manchester's arrest came a flurry of news articles announcing that the notorious Roofman had been identified and caught. According to these reports, investigators were eventually able to link him to crimes beyond just the 2 robberies in North Carolina by looking at his travel records with the military. It turned out that many of the Roofman's robberies had stopped in certain states when he left, only to start in others just as he arrived for military assignments or training exercises. Though it's unclear just how many of these robberies Manchester was convicted of, he was ultimately sentenced to 45 years in prison on charges ranging from robbery with a dangerous weapon to kidnapping, possession of burglary tools, and breaking and entering. While this initially appeared to be the end of the Roofman, little did anyone know that his story was far from over. Following his conviction at the end of 2000, Jeffrey Manchester was sent to the Brown Creek Correctional Institution, a medium-security prison located in Anson County, North Carolina. For nearly the next 4 years, Manchester played the part of a model prisoner. A search of his inmate records lists 0 infractions during this time, and his good behavior earned him a position in the prison's metal shop. However, as much as the Roofman gave the appearance of quietly serving his time, he had no intention of completing his full sentence. Instead, he had been using the same skills of observation that he had used to commit his robberies to find blind spots in the prison security. This included familiarizing himself with the comings and goings of prisoners, the shifts and schedules of guards, and any vehicles that made their way in and out of the prison grounds. Finally, in the summer of 2004, he was ready to make his escape. The key to Manchester's plan was his job in the prison metal shop. Every day, a delivery truck would come inside the shop area to pick up the beds, lockers, and stainless steel kitchen items that were manufactured there before leaving the prison grounds. The truck arrived on the same set schedule every time, and Manchester decided that this was his way out. After obtaining some measurements of the metal frame rails that ran underneath the delivery truck, Manchester cut a length of plywood so that it would fit snugly between the rails, creating a platform where he could lie. The idea was to ride on the vehicle as a hidden passenger until he was outside the prison walls, at which point he could go on the run. Because Manchester knew that the underside of the delivery truck would be checked by guards with mirrors, he spray-painted his plywood platform board black to match the underside of the vehicle. Some reports we came across also state that he completed the illusion with a couple of additional pieces of spray-painted cardboard, so that his head and feet couldn't be seen at either end. Finally, Manchester reportedly chose to execute his plan on a rainy day, meaning that guards were less likely to thoroughly check the underside of the delivery truck. On the afternoon of June 15th, 2004, Jeffrey Manchester put his plan into action and escaped from the Brown Creek Correctional Institution, making him the first person to do so in the facility's 11-year history. Once again, the Roofman was free. Though authorities suspected that Manchester might try to head back to his home state of California and possibly make contact with his family there, he instead traveled just 40 miles northwest to the city of Charlotte. It was here, at an unassuming retail plaza, that he would set up a living space that would baffle and amuse both the public and law enforcement officials for years to come. For his new home, the Roofman chose a Toys R Us store located in a complex called the Triangle Shopping Center, just off of Monroe Road. He hid out in a small cubbyhole area he made for himself behind a bike rack in the store. The rack was conveniently located up against one of the store's walls, allowing him to do what he did best: cut and tunnel out more space for himself so that he could remain out of sight. For the first little while, Manchester only dared come out of his secret hideout at night when the Toys R Us was closed. However, being that he was in a toy store, he found plenty of things to occupy himself with. He raced remote control cars on the roof in the middle of the night, rode bikes around the store for exercise, and managed to get most of the nourishment that he needed by stealing and eating baby food. As funny as this all may seem, the Roofman hadn't chosen a Toys R Us as his home simply for his own amusement. His real intention was to pull off a major robbery at the location. To this end, he decided that there was no better place to plan the heist than at the scene of the crime itself. As weeks passed, Manchester continually cased the store, establishing the routines of employees and security guards looking for blind spots. To aid him in his scheme, he set up baby monitors so that he could watch things in the store remotely, and even began secretly changing the schedules of employees and security personnel to better align with his plans. However, like with the Roofman's previous criminal escapades, the longer he went without being caught, the bolder he became. Obviously unsatisfied by his constant diet of baby food, a couple of months after he escaped, he was regularly eating lunch at a nearby Red Lobster and had actively started getting involved in the local community. By October, Manchester had joined the Crossroads Presbyterian Church, which was conveniently located just a few hundred yards away from his Toys R Us hideout. He introduced himself as John Zorin, and soon became an active member of the congregation. He even started dating a woman named Lee, who he had met at one of the church's singles events. Lee was attracted by John's generosity, sense of humor, and kindness, and was impressed that he wanted to spend so much time hanging out at her apartment playing games with her and her 3 kids. Of course, the truth was that their dates could not have ended at his place, since he was living behind a bike rack at Toys R Us. When asked about why they never spent the night at his place, Manchester reportedly told Lee that he had a government job that he couldn't tell anyone about, and that his accommodations were in a sterile and uncomfortable office-type building. Though many might consider Lee gullible for believing this, it's important to point out that Manchester told this same story to everyone else that he came in contact with, and no one, especially those at the church, had any suspicions that John Zorin was anyone other than who he said he was. For his part, Manchester tried his best not to give them any reason to. He seldom failed to attend Wednesday night Bible study. He volunteered to get involved in the church's charitable work, and when the holiday season rolled around, no one donated more to the congregation's toy drive than he did. Of course, these toys were actually all stolen from the store where the Roofman was hiding out. Speaking of the holiday season, as the Toys R Us store became increasingly more busy in the lead up to Christmas, Manchester decided to make improvements to his living quarters in order to remain undetected. It was during this time that he realized he could tunnel directly through the store's wall into the adjacent unit, which just so happened to be an abandoned Circuit City. This time, the Roofman truly went all out on his new home. In a hidden area under a stairwell just on the other side of the wall inside the Circuit City, he created what can only be described as an 11-year-old boy's paradise. Though unfortunately, there are no pictures of Manchester's hideout that we could find, news reports describe it as a 4 by 10 foot sort of closet that had been painted to blend in with the wall. Inside, he decorated the space with posters, put up a mini basketball hoop, and brought in a DVD player. He also added more baby monitors to add to his makeshift surveillance system, and even installed a smoke detector and piped in water from the Toys R Us next door. Many reports would later amusingly point out that Manchester appeared to have something of an obsession with Spider-Man. Several Spider-Man posters were found on the walls of his hideout. A Spider-Man 2 DVD was found along with the DVD player, and Manchester was even sleeping on Spider-Man sheets. Nevertheless, by all accounts, this new hideout seems to have been much better than the first one behind the bike rack. In order to continue to travel between the Toys R Us and the Circuit City as he pleased, Manchester left the tunnel between the 2 units intact, similarly blending the trapdoors he had created in with the walls on both sides. As cunning as Manchester had been, however, at some point he must have become aware that he couldn't continue living like this forever. Employees at the Toys R Us were definitely aware that things were going missing, and Manchester had a couple of close calls when police were called to the store to investigate. On December 26th, he decided it was time to pull off the big robbery that he had been planning. Unfortunately for the Roofman, when he tried to pull off the crime, things did not go according to plan. Similar to the 2000 robbery in Belmont, when he held up the Toys R Us, employees were able to contact police sooner than he anticipated. It turned out that 2 of them had managed to slip out during the robbery. Things went even further sideways when an off-duty sheriff's deputy arrived at the scene. Manchester responded by punching her, stealing her gun, and running away. Amazingly, though the Roofman seemed cornered, he managed to escape through his trapdoors undetected. It's unclear whether or not he returned to the hideout within the Circuit City, but what we do know is that when police conducted their initial search, they did not find him. While they discovered the trapdoor leading from the Toys R Us, as well as a whole bunch of stolen merchandise inside the ceiling of the Circuit City, the actual 4 by 10 room that Manchester had constructed remained hidden for several days. It wasn't until January 2nd, 2005, when an officer was conducting another routine inspection of the abandoned Circuit City, that Manchester's mind-blowing secret room was uncovered. Unfortunately for him, by this time, investigators were already fairly certain that the Roofman was behind the Toys R Us robbery. This was due to the fact that the crime fit his MO, and happened fairly close to where he had escaped. When they distributed photos of Manchester in the local area, members of the Crossroads Presbyterian Church identified him as the man who had been going by the name John Zorin, and were shocked to discover who he really was. In a bid to cover his tracks, Manchester burned down a dentist office where he had gotten his teeth fixed while on the run, presumably worried that police would be able to find his dental records there. This had the opposite effect of what he intended, and only made investigators more suspicious. Manchester's identity was confirmed when one of his fingerprints were lifted from his secret room in the Circuit City. On January 5th, police contacted Manchester's girlfriend Lee and arranged for her to have him come over to her house for a supposed 40th birthday party. Manchester showed up, believing he would be able to see his girlfriend one last time before continuing his life on the run. He arrived with flowers, but was arrested by waiting officers before he could make it inside the apartment. Manchester was ultimately able to speak to Lee after his arrest, and according to reports, he apologized for everything he had put her and her kids through. In an interview, Lee described her shock at the whole situation, saying, quote, "I don't hate him. I'm disappointed and confused. I don't know whether to smack him or hug him." The same confused sentiments were also expressed by many police officers and investigators who obviously wanted to catch him, but at the same time seemed almost impressed by what he had accomplished. One sergeant with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg police said, quote, "You hate to compliment the guy because he's a dirtbag, but we can learn a lot from him." Another sergeant remarked, "This would make a great movie." Manchester was ultimately convicted on a slew of new charges, including malicious use of explosives to damage property, burning an unoccupied building, breaking and entering, possession of a firearm by a felon, robbery with a dangerous weapon, and prison escape. An inmate search lists his total incarceration term as 47 years, 2 months, and 15 days. Unlike his previous prison term, it appears that Manchester has racked up quite a few infractions since he was recaptured, including at least 2 for additional escape attempts. Manchester is currently incarcerated at the Central Prison in Raleigh, where his projected release date is December 4th, 2036. Do you know of any other cases like this that you think we should check out? Tell us about them in the comments section below. As always, if you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest releases. Thank you for watching.